is not working out today. Somebody please tell us, were we speaking into the void yesterday, and or worse, were we not speaking anything into the void at all whatsoever? Were we just radio silent on Spaces? Because we're live on YouTube. I know we're on YouTube. I guess that's the only thing I'm fully aware of. There's a Twitch. Our boy from somewhere popped in yesterday to ask what topic we are talking about. So that's never a good sign. And who knows about Instagram. But yeah, we're live for day 3, pre-game, week 0 marathon, freed from Booch ball. Here with the West Coast correspondent, Jazzy J. Jazzy, pop in. How you doing?
I'm thriving. San Francisco is 70 and beautiful today. You know what we say. This is the real America. This is ACC country out here in San Francisco.
NorCal is an Atlantic Coast state, apparently.
Damn right we are.
So Monday night we talked big picture. Yesterday we talked offense. Tonight, what's left? Special teams?
We got that D.
We're going to give you the D tonight here on this stream. I'm not even going to call this an episode. This is just us talking some shit, basically. This is our full off season has been saved for content so that we can get on here. And I've been hyping myself up for months. Now I'm here to hype Jazzo up because I've been drinking the Kool-Aid. And you're not drinking the Kool-Aid, though. You've been burned too many times.
Freed. I've been burnt way too many times. I've felt love and I've lost it. I've seen promise and hope only to have it taken away by sweaty Cuban men who lead our team. I know that the University of Miami, like all the women in my life, will eventually let me down. It's not a matter of if, it is a matter of when.
Yeah. I remember the 2015 team, which was my first year after college. We started that season against, it was either Bethune-Cookman or FAMU. It was one of those teams, and we won 70-zip or 70-7 or something like that.
It was 77-7. It was against Savannah State. And they literally had to call the game early because we were beating that ass so bad.
Yeah, you were still there. That would have been your senior year. So, yeah, I remember watching that game, and it was like the fourth quarter, and Chalk Gray just came in and scored a touchdown, and I was so hyped. I was like, we are nasty. This is our 4th string running back, and he's nasty. And I really thought we were going to win it all that year. And that was the year that Al Golden got fired after Clemson destroyed us. And then it was really only a few weeks after that we had the miracle in Durham with what was the interim coach's name? Scott?
Oh, yeah, Larry Scott.
Yeah, Larry Scott was the head coach. I remember him when they finally said the flag was picked up or whatever, and he was like, yeah, we won.
Freed, you weren't there at Miami with us at that time, but I remember being at Brother Jimmy's in Brickell, watching that game, thinking to myself, we're going to fucking lose to Duke. I can't believe it. But God Almighty above and his chosen vassal, Robert Wright, decided to draw up the perfect 8 lateral play and then blind the referees to the fact that Mark Walton was definitely down and there was like 7 penalties.
Borderline. It's a bang play.
But
and that block was from the side, not the back. But yeah, I still would like to hear from a biased third party that Robert's fingerprints were all over that as much as he claimed that they were. But we'll give him the benefit of the doubt until proven otherwise. Wasn't that Halloween?
It was. It
Yeah.
was.
I was at my apartment in Lubbock with a Tinder girl, the Tinder girl before the Tinder girl that I married. So a no-name Tinder girl. And I remember just watching that game. And that was when she realized how absolutely insane I was when I just started screaming when Njoku hit that crackback block. Oh, it was over. That was a good night.
Freed, this reminds me. Brother Jimmy's. Weren't we at Brother Jimmy's the night?
We're not going to talk about that.
The night?
We're not going to talk about that. All right, let's talk about something real. Defense. Where are we starting today?
We start up front where we feel the most confident, or should we start with the guys patrolling the air?
Up to you.
Let's start with the guys patrolling the air.
Okay.
I took one look through our secondary, and I'm going to be completely honest with you, Freed. I have no clue who any of these guys are. Like, I mean, I knew who Cameron Kitchens was. We've had really good secondary players and defensive backs for the last couple of years, but it looks pretty thin now, and I'm a little worried.
Yeah, I'm scrolling through our depth chart trying to find defensive backs, and I control F'd back, and there's a lot of people that have the word back in their name. I realize now that almost every position is a back of some sort. You have your quarterback, your halfback, your fullback. I don't think we have any of those on the roster, but then we have linebacker and defensive back. So I finally made my way to that section of the roster. But yeah, it's an interesting group. It's probably the group that I think any Miami fan would say they're most intrigued about, potentially you could say concerned about. I think that would be valid because right off the bat, we lost our two starting safeties to the draft. We lost at least one, I guess you could say, starting other defensive back to the draft. The transfer from Oklahoma last year. He was a starter and a solid player. Do you know what I'm talking about? His name just slipped my mind. But we're basically replacing three starters.
Oh, you mean, what is it, Jaden Davis?
Yeah, Jaden Davis. We're basically replacing three starters if you want to call Jaden Davis a starter, which I feel like he was, because when we talk defensive backs, we're basically playing five at all times because, nickel is kind of the main base defense nowadays. So I guess let's get into it with what we are bringing back, and we can start at cornerback. I thought Daryl Porter was great last year. I thought going into the season that he was going to be one of our two best players. And he was really getting slept on going into last season. And I don't know why people were like really infatuated with Damari Brown as a freshman, and even more so his brother. When he transferred in from UCF, he was basically handed a starting job in most, Canes fan and analyst minds in training camp. And the thing is, though, he wasn't good at UCF, but he was hyped like he was supposed to be good. So he came here. People thought he would have a starting job and be good, but he wasn't. And now he's starting at safety for Florida State, and he was getting broken down left and right against Georgia Tech. So we're not really going to be missing him. But Damari became a good player, but I just thought it was kind of ridiculous that people were looking at him as a true freshman, thinking he was going to start over Daryl Porter Jr., who had put up like good numbers at West Virginia 2 years prior. Didn't do a whole lot in his first year at Miami, but was kind of getting acclimated. And then last year got his feet under him, really played well, was one of the better corners in the conference. And I think he comes in this year kind of entrenched as like a really good player, one of the better ones in the conference. And he wasn't putting up numbers because people weren't even throwing at him last year. So I feel good on his side of the field. It's that second cornerback spot. and the safeties where we have a whole lot of unknowns.
I would say, I mean, literally, I don't know them. Like, who are these dudes?
All right, so I think Damari Brown is going to start. The question is he going to be the second corner or is he going to be the nickel? And people are talking like he's going to be the nickel. He's a bigger kid. He's going to be a true sophomore, but he's just naturally big. He came in big, kind of physically ready, able to provide some run support. So it kind of makes sense to have him as a nickel because he's not linebacker sized, of course, but he's basically safety sized. So he can support the run, but he has the speed and agility to do the things to cover the slot guys as well as the size to cover some of those tight ends. So the nickel gets asked to do a lot, and they're also blitzing a lot. And with the Guidry defense, it's just there's a lot going on. So the nickel is really important, and I think he could be a very solid player. And if he's starting there, then the other cornerback spot is probably Jadis Richard. So he was here last year. Last year was his first year as a transfer from Vanderbilt. He basically started as a freshman at Vanderbilt. So he got a lot of good experience in the SEC. Obviously that team's not good, but he came here last year and it was kind of like a Daryl Porter Jr. first season where he didn't play that much. He was kind of getting his feet underneath him. And if he could make a similar jump, we're going to be in great shape. He's like another bigger cornerback. So if you have Damari Brown and Jadis Richard out there, those are two bigger guys. And then Daryl Porter, who's, a little smaller, but covers extremely well. He's not like a tiny dude, like a Trajan Bandy. He's not like that size. But so I feel good about our starting corners. And then the question is depth. We don't have a whole lot of upperclassmen behind them who have basically played at all. We have Robert Stafford, who's going to be coming into his second year. He didn't play at all last year. He's kind of a project, a super fast dude to play cornerback. No idea if he's going to play. We brought in a transfer from Marshall, which is Guidry's, old school. That's De'Ani Hill. He had good numbers, I guess, at Marshall. You don't really know how that's going to translate, but you just got to kind of trust the coaches that they pick guys who they think can translate. So he's like our only cornerback who's actually a real player that's currently in the NCAA video game. So are you playing that, by the way? You don't have a system, do you?
I have a PS4. I have to trade it in to go get a PS5 because, I want to play NCAA football.
But you haven't been so far?
I've yet to play. I feel like a failure.
Yeah, I haven't either, just by choice, not having a system. But I was talking to Alex on Booch Ball Week 0. We were talking about it, and he was kind of telling me a little bit about who he's been using. And it's kind of funny because De'Ani Hill is like our only real cornerback in the game. So a lot of times when you were seeing the stat lines, you'd see some big stuff from him because he was like the only one. But I don't know if he's going to play. He could be a factor this year. We need some of these no-name people who you're not familiar with to like be that third and fourth cornerback because like you need those guys. And then there's a couple freshmen. So the true freshmen coming in are Ryan Mack and OJ Frederic. So,
what about Zaquan Patterson?
Yeah, Zaquan. He's a safety, but
okay, yeah.
So yeah, he's going to be. I think he's going to get some big time snaps, but we'll get to safety in a little bit. Mac and Frederic were both kind of lower rated recruits, but they both bring some like stuff to the table. They're both pretty polished, I think. And from what people were saying about fall camp, Frederic, who literally just showed up at the end of summer, is apparently really balling out, and people think he could be a player, kind of as that maybe fourth cornerback getting into the rotation. So we just got to see with these dudes. there's talent there. There's just not a whole lot of returning production where we know what we're going to get beyond Daryl Porter.
Right.
So if we then go into the safeties, it's almost the same situation, but a little bit different because they brought in the transfer from Washington, Mish Powell. Have you heard anything about him?
I remember he added some significant depth to that Washington team that was in the playoff last year. Correct? He was a
Yeah,
starter for them.
yeah, he was basically their starting nickel. So I think in my mind, in an ideal world, he would play nickel for us too, because that's probably where he's best suited. But we just honestly need him to play safety, kind of out of necessity, because we don't have a veteran safety if he was to slide to nickel. And I could see that maybe happening during the year, especially if Zaquan like comes on strong. And by week 5 or 6, if the coaching staff realizes like, okay, we have to play Zaquan Patterson, I could see Mish
Right.
Powell sliding to nickel, because if that happens, then you can adjust to where Damari becomes the third corner, and then you have 3 corners that you can trust if Mish is going to be the kind of the go-to nickel. But they're going to kind of slide around. But anyway, yeah, Mish Powell apparently started as a walk-on at Washington. I've heard people say he was a dude who had like Ivy League offers coming out of high school, ended up going to Washington. I think he's from up there.
Yeah.
So he, earned a scholarship, earned a starting role, and, got the experience of playing in the national championship. So that's big time. I think he's going to be kind of like a Xavier Restrepo in terms of like maybe not the most talented, but super smart and should kind of be the glue guy for the defense. And then he's probably going to be starting with Jaden Harris, who filled in for Cam Kitchens last year when he had those concussions, but it's not really confirmed. Markeith Williams apparently had a good camp too, had a lot of interceptions. I think it was mostly against the second team and third team quarterbacks, but yeah, I think it's going to be Jaden Harris starting, and he's potentially a really good player. We just don't know. So it's almost like we're going back a couple of years to where we just don't have that guy. I feel like for most of the last few years, we've always had a veteran safety. We've always had one of those dudes like Amari Carter or Gervin Hall back there who maybe weren't good, but at least were experienced. And now we're going for more of the youth movement.
Well, I mean, throw it way back. Sheldrick Redwine.
Yeah.
Young Sheldrick.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, honestly, Redwine and Jaquan Johnson, that was a nasty duo.
Yeah, I mean, we used to. I mean, the one knock against our defense for the years, we were there was that, they couldn't stop most people. Although they stepped it up finally once we graduated. I mean, but we've produced some really solid defensive backs. I mean, I'm just going down the list of who we've had drafted. I mean, yeah. Mike Jackson Sr., Sheldrick. Who else is out here playing DB? I mean, Tyreek. We've had some really solid secondary talent for the last couple of years. That's why it's so stunning to look down the roster and be like, who the hell are these dudes?
Yeah, even some of the transfers, like Adrian Colbert came in and as kind of like an under the radar transfer. Like he wasn't a starter at Texas, but he came here and ended up starting, and he's still in the league. So yeah, a bunch of guys, and even more recently, DJ Ivy is producing in the league. So dudes who played here and weren't even great here were, it's that classic case of we didn't develop them, or maybe didn't put them in the right position to succeed. But who else do we have here? You called out Zaquan Patterson. Yeah, I think he could be a potential big time safety for us. It's just it's tough to expect that out of out of a freshman,
True.
especially week one.
Yeah.
But by the end of the year, you know, like Zaquan's not going to redshirt. I don't think he's going to be on special teams all day, and he's going to start getting snaps. And we also had Jason Taylor's son, Isaiah, transferred in. He's a safety. I think he's technically a preferred walk-on, but he was someone who played at Arizona for the past couple seasons, and he could potentially get into the mix too.
I would have rather had his other brother, the tight end.
Yeah, Mason.
Yeah.
Classic name. That's got to be confusing when you're like growing up in the house and mom's mad and she's like, Mason. Like, I wouldn't name my son Derek. Derek.
Derek Kingfried.
Yeah, that's just you're just asking for confusion. Like, I don't want to get yelled at there's that half second of fear every time the kid gets yelled at. I don't need that.
Yeah. All right. So we've settled that our secondary is going to be a big open question. Obviously, there's some hope there, but let's move one layer in. Linebackers.
Yeah, I like what we got with the linebackers. I think we're in a much better spot than we were last year. And last year we were okay. Top heavy probably. I mean, Kiko Mauinoa, I thought was the defensive MVP last year.
For sure.
He was really good, but beyond him, it was kind of like a layer of mediocrity, I would say. Wesley Basaint was a true sophomore last year. He was okay. We had KJ Cloyd, who came in, was a one and done from Louisville, kind of co-starter almost with Wesley. But again, he was okay. And then we had the Corey Flagg. He was significantly better as our backup linebacker than he was as our starter the year before. But just, to keep it 100, you're not going to win a championship with Corey Flagg getting significant snaps. Like, that's got to be your fifth, sixth type linebacker. That can't be somebody who's getting 20, 30, 40 snaps a game. That's not what we need. So Kiko's back, which is massive for Miami. Basaint is back. Both of those dudes, you have to expect they're going to be better. I mean, one more year in the system. And that's a major key just in and of itself, consistency with the defensive coordinator and playing together. Just from that alone, you expect that they're going to get better. But also the fact that they were both relatively young last year, going into their third and fourth years now, respectively, should be better. And then behind them, we brought in another transfer from Louisville. This is, a theme because our linebackers coach came from Louisville, so he has a history with these guys. So this dude we brought in is Jalen Alderman. He basically started at Louisville last year. He's kind of part of the reason why KJ Cloyd transferred the year before. So got to think that's going to be a bit of an upgrade over what we had in Cloyd from the previous year. And then we have the freshmen from last year's class who are now going to be sophomores. Popo and Bobby Washington. Seems like Popo's the guy that's going to be kind of filling the snaps that Corey Flagg had last year. And that's exciting because he's just a bigger, faster, more talented player. Obviously, we don't know what we're going to get from him yet. So there's a question mark until he puts it together on the field. But Popo's a big-time linebacker who could kind of fill what Kiko has become next season once Kiko's gone. So I like those 4 at linebacker. And then there's a lot more unprovens behind them. There's some the freshmen have come in and made some noise. It was a pretty big time linebacker class, honestly.
Yeah, highlight that for me, Freed. Who are we most excited about coming in this freshman class? Does this freshman class sort of feel like what was that freshman class with Shaq Quarterman and who are the other 2 dudes who ended up?
Pinkney and Zach McLeod.
Exactly. Yeah.
Pinkney was pretty good. I mean, he was never really an NFL type prospect, but he was a very good college linebacker. It was kind of McLeod that came in as the best athlete of the 3 and just never really figured it out at linebacker. But yeah, it's a similar talent level. The big difference is they don't have to come in and start.
Right.
I don't think any of them are as college ready as Shaq was when he came in, because like Shaq was the rare type of dude who came in and was here. Like, I'm trying to explain this. I'm using my hands because I know we can see each other, but he was very consistent over his 4 years at Miami. Did he even last 4 years? I don't remember.
Yeah, he came back for his senior year, but I think what he was to me was he was the most physically and mentally mature linebacker, and probably one of the most mature freshmen we had ever had on campus.
Yeah, right. So there wasn't a ton of growth from him over the years because he came in so ready.
Yeah.
And he started as a freshman. And if you were to say, all right, if this is what he's like as a freshman, I can't wait to see him as a senior. That didn't really happen for him because it was like Albert Pujols coming into the league as a rookie at 22. In reality, that dude was 30, right? How much more maturing was he going to have? But no. So this class, these 3 dudes, we flipped Adarius Hayes on National Signing Day from the University of Florida. He was the highest rated recruit at the linebacker position, and he's a big kid. They have him listed at 6'4", 230. So he's, clearly the tallest one in this room, and size-wise ready, but maybe mentally not quite there. I think if they had to put him out there, he wouldn't be out of place, but he's just not ready to start. But they don't need him to start. So that's totally fine. Similarly, who is the freshman this year? So it's Cam Pruitt, and then we also have one more.
Is it?
Am I tripping?
Who is it?
Maybe it was just 2 of them.
I thought there were 3 also, but you know this better than I do.
Yeah. Well, Cam Pruitt comes in at 6'2", 200 listing. So he's smaller, but he has been he was an early enrollee, one of the most impressive dudes in spring camp. They were talking about him like nonstop the entire spring camp, and whatever podcast or website you were reading or listening to was pretty much just nonstop hyping up Cam Bobby Pruitt. People think he's going to play this year, potentially as like the 5th linebacker in the rotation, especially when they go to 3 linebackers on the field at once. Because he's small enough that he's almost like a big nickel.
Right.
You can either have that nickel defensive back or you can have the 3rd kind of Sam linebacker, and he kind of fills that role. He played a lot of safety in high school, but he's basically being played as a linebacker now. So we'll see if he gets in the mix. And yeah, I could have sworn there was one more, but
I don't know.
I'm not seeing it on the roster.
I looked through the roster, and it was a bunch of white freshmen, like dudes who definitely will hopefully never see the light of day.
I'm going to look up the recruiting page and see who we brought in last class.
While you're doing that, we'll get some inside information on some of these other freshmen. Luke DeLees, freshman Oak Park, Illinois. That kid's never going to see the light of day.
Yeah, no, I guess it was just those two. Maybe I'm just tripping. I don't know.
Let's see.
I must be thinking of the year before when we brought in 3. Because yeah, the year before we brought in Bobby Washington, Popo, and then also Marcellus Pulliam, who has since transferred. But one other dude who could be in the mix would be Chase Smith. He was like the it freshman from like 4 years ago, and he's still here. He's just been hurt, and he's apparently healthy now and ready to play. And he's another dude who's going to be pushing for kind of backup snaps at linebacker. At the least, he's going to be on special teams, being just another athlete out there. It's just all about, is he going to be able to kind of get back to play speed after he had some nasty lower body injuries over the past few years. They also still show Malik Bryan as a linebacker. He was another dude from last year's class, because I guess it was 4 we brought in last year. He's basically moving to defensive line kind of as a stand-up pass rusher at this point. So we can talk about him a little bit when we get to the defensive line. But yeah, I like where we're at with linebackers. I think it's top heavy in the sense that we have Kiko Mauinoa, who should be an all-conference player, potentially an all-American. I think he's that good. And people seem to think Wes Basainth is going to take a step forward too. So if that happens, we'd have 2 studs. Kind of worst case scenario, we have 1 very good linebacker and a bunch of dudes to just throw at the wall and see who sticks in terms of productive snaps.
Yeah, I mean, again, a linebacking core that has more depth and seniority that than we've seen at least over the last couple of years.
Yeah, no doubt. And honestly, it's an across the board type thing. This team has gotten significantly deeper than we're used to seeing. And I think there's no position that exemplifies that better than the defensive line.
Let's do it.
All right. So are we going to go defensive line as a whole, or do you want to start outside or inside?
No, let's go line as a whole. I mean, obviously, you can't talk about Miami's defensive line without starting with the man, the myth, the legend, Rueben Bain Jr. I mean, that guy came in and was an impact true freshman.
Yeah, similar to what we talked about with Shaq Quarterman, Bain came in ready to play. And the one thing that I wouldn't say I worry about this, but I feel like this. I don't think Bain is going to make a massive jump. I think similar trajectory with Shaq, to where what we saw last year was kind of going to be kind of consistent over this year and next year. People are talking about Bain like he's the best player in the conference on defense. People are talking about him like an All-American. I'm not convinced he's the best defensive lineman on the team. And that, honestly, I don't mean any offense to him as a player. Like, I think he's going to be a really good player this year.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that we're insanely loaded at defensive end. And I think I could make pretty strong arguments that there's better athletes at the position. And if Bain's the focal point for other teams, he's not the one who's going to be grabbing sacks this year.
Yeah. I mean, again, an insanely deep defensive line. So if you think Rueben Bain's not the best player on our line, Freed, who is the best player on our defensive line?
That's a good question. I think there's a few different candidates, but I'm going to go with Akeem Mesidor. I think this is like the forgotten man. This was our guy at the beginning of last season, and then he got hurt in like the second game of the year against A&M. But let's not forget, at the beginning of last season, he was starting over Rueben Bain. And I mean, that's fair to say. Bain was coming in as a freshman, but Mesidor was the guy. Bain was behind him. injuries happen. Bane jumped him in the depth chart, but I'm not sold that Akeem Mesidor isn't going to step right back in and, as a fifth-year senior, just kind of impose his will and say, all right, I'm that guy. I still want to get drafted and have a killer year. We also have Tyler Barron, the transfer from Tennessee. This is going to be a one and done type dude, another fifth-year senior. And again, these are full grown men, 23 years old at this point. Ruben Bain, second year in college, like we said, he came in ready. He's physically mature, hard worker, ready to go. But I'm not going to sell short the possibility that some of these older dudes are still going to end up being the alpha on the defensive line by year's end.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that you're wrong. I mean, to call Ruben Bain slightly less, that dude is still, he's 6'3", 275. That's a fucking man. That's not a boy.
Listen, I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong about this, and that he just goes out and puts up Greg Rousseau type numbers and, forces his way onto All-America teams and first round draft boards just by sheer outworking everybody else, because he's not going to be a combine monster.
No.
Like he has good technique. He's quick and he's very strong, but he's not going to be like that combine monster, that athletic freak that tends to get everybody crazy hyped as that first round type pick. Not saying you can't be a great college pass rusher without all that, but I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is I feel like the hype for Ruben Bain may have gotten a little bit out of control because last year we were really thin at defensive end. He came in and did his thing, but I think people are expecting another huge step from him. And I'm just saying maybe that's a little unrealistic. Maybe we shouldn't be projecting him to be an All-American. Maybe we should just be happy with him being one of the best players on a loaded defensive line.
Well, right. And, last year he really did have to step up, but you're right. I'm looking down the line. We've got more transfer talent. I mean, our line is stacked. I think possibly Ruben Bain doesn't even have the opportunity to make as many plays because dudes are just going to get there first.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a great problem to have because, like we said, you can't double team everybody. If offensive lines are going to play us straight up, they are generally going to have 5-on-4, right? So they got to pick somebody to double team. Is that going to be Ruben Bain? Is that the focal point? Maybe. If so, the other side of the line, good luck. You got Tyler Barron over there. That's right.
We're going to eat.
We haven't even talked about Elijah Alston yet. He's coming in from Marshall. This is another Lance Guidry pickup who PFF had as like the best returning pass rusher from last season. I don't put a whole lot of stock into those numbers, especially when making the jump from G5 to P5, because the year before, remember, who was it? Thomas Gore came in with that 90 PFF pass rating, and he was super cheeks at Miami. He was okay. In a couple of games when we needed him, he gave us some snaps. But when we talk about, and I'm starting to get into the defensive interior, and I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but when we talk about the guys we're replacing on last year's team, the dudes who were getting a lot of snaps, like Jafari Harvey was getting a ton of snaps last year. Thomas Gore and Jacob Lichtenstein were getting a ton of snaps last year on the interior. Leonard Taylor, I mean, he's a beast. He's just made the Jets, but he wasn't producing for us much at all. He was he was a presence on the inside, but he was being asked to be like that nose tackle, which isn't really his game, I guess. But we just didn't really have the size of anybody else to do that. So the thing that's interesting to me about the D-line is I feel like Miami should be able to consistently get pressure without blitzing. Like we have so much talent, especially on the edges. And there's a ton of guys we haven't even talked about yet. But if we can get pressure, like just sending 4 or occasionally mixing in one blitzer, Guidry can have the formations going so that there's 4 or 5 guys on every play that are ready to come in, but you don't know which 4 or 5 guys it's going to be. If we can get pressure with 4, have 7, sometimes 8 back in coverage, that's going to help out that young secondary a ton.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that was my thought is if you don't have to get pressure with, dudes outside of your D line, like you have more ability to cover. And I think that's going to be our weakness. And that's going to, I mean, I say that now and, watch, we'll have like 2 dudes end up as All-Americans just because I'm saying that.
If our defensive line is what we think it is, the secondary is not going to have problems because
exactly.
the QB's not going to have time to throw the ball. So we're going to end up with a lot of interceptions. There's not going to be a whole lot of passing yards because they're just going to have to throw the ball. So who else on the defensive line, at least on the edges that we haven't talked about yet? I mentioned that
I mean, we've had some talk of Tyler Barron, but I would love to know, what are you seeing? I mean, the guy's got tape, plenty of tape as a redshirt senior. Yeah. But I mean, tell me what kind of player profile are you feeling from Tyler Barron?
Yeah, honestly, I don't really know. I haven't watched him. He's big and he's athletic. So I think he's big enough. Like they talk about how in previous years we had Mesidor kind of kicking inside. Bain would kick inside on third downs. Barron's another guy that can slide inside. So when we have that third and long, if we want to go kind of NASCAR package with basically 4 defensive ends, we could get all these dudes, on the field at the same time, basically. In terms of what kind of player he's going to be, no idea. I think if you just compare him to what he's replacing in a Jafari Harvey, right. I mean, it's a bigger dude, an older dude, a more talented dude, a physical specimen who's been in the SEC. I think his best game last year was against Virginia Tech. He had like 2 or 3 sacks in that game last year. So, that's the type of team he's going to play week in and week out. But I was trying to think of Malik Bryant, the dude who, like I mentioned, kind of came in as a linebacker last year, played there as a freshman, but he was always a pass rusher in high school, and they're kind of bringing him back to basically just be a pass rusher. And he's a guy that we could see on third down come in at defensive end, kick that Tyler Barron or Ruben Bain to the inside, and just, pin the ears back and get after the quarterback.
Right. I mean, Malik Bryant has tons of potential, and it would be great to see him start to harvest some of that, especially putting him in the right positions.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's slide inside to the defensive interior for the DTs.
Yeah.
We brought in like 4 transfers at this position this year. We still have a couple guys who have been in the program for a little while, but the majority of our snaps seem like they're going to go to CJ Clark and Simeon Barrow.
Right.
So CJ Clark is the 5th-year senior who was at NC State. He is a dude who basically was just occupying the middle of that NC State defense. And he's probably not going to be a sack machine or anything like that, but he's the run stuffer,
right?
The plug in the middle of that defensive line. And that's a guy that we just didn't have last year. We were kind of asking Leonard Taylor to do that, and that was not really his game. But CJ Clark is down to just sit in the middle and eat people. And he's another guy who, at over 300 pounds, are you going to double team him, or are you going to leave the center on an island by himself? Because that's the choice these offenses are going to have to make. They're going to have to start leaving in tight ends, leaving in running backs, doing everything they can to just occupy our 4 defensive linemen. And honestly, same with Simeon Barrow. He's coming in from Michigan State.
Right.
And this is another one and done, an old dude, 23 years old. And everybody wanted this dude because he's another, 300-pound, just like monster in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, right. We've got dudes who are going to play that run stuffing D tackle, right? So, allowing our ends to really shine.
That's right. That's right. We also brought in Marley Cook, who was a transfer from Middle Tennessee State. He was on that team that broke our hearts a few years ago. He's a little bit smaller. They have him listed at 6'2", 298, which is, it's funny to say that that's like a little bit smaller because that's still rather large. And I'm pretty sure he set some sort of a squatting record for the Miami program this year. So maybe he's a little bit smaller, but he's going to be an absolute force, just another not movable defensive tackle that you can kind of plug and play as the third DT. And then we have a couple returning guys who are younger and haven't really proven anything, but a ton of potential. So that's Ahmad Moden. You remember his brother?
Anthony.
Yeah.
My favorite part about Ahmad Moden is that he is Ahmad Moden Senior.
As a second-year college player, you'd love to see that. But yeah, good for him. And then where's our other dude? Josh Horton. Horton. Going to be a redshirt. So Ahmad is going into his third year. Josh Horton going into his second year. He's a big dude, and honestly, you can tell by what number they get how much the team respects them. Josh
Right.
Horton with a single-digit number. I'd be surprised if he's not going to play this year because they don't just give those numbers out, to anybody.
Right.
So he did something, whether the team saw his talent and said, all right, we got to make sure this dude stays. We want him to be happy. Because that's the type of dude who could have hit the transfer portal and secured a bag. He's massive. And, second-year player, played high school football in Georgia. Like, that's a DT of the future. So maybe he'll find some snaps in that fourth DT role. There's, Ahmad and Horton are going to be fighting for that fourth DT role with Justin Scott, the 5-star freshman. And for the record, this is the first time we've talked about a freshman on the defensive line so far as we're going through. And we brought in 3 5-stars.
Right, yeah. I was going to say,
so
we squatted deep this year.
Yeah,
Mario doing work.
The defensive line class was like the jewel of the recruiting cycle for 2024, I guess. Yeah, 4. So yeah, absolutely loaded. I'll talk to you about those guys now. So really the only one who I think has a chance to play this year is Justin Scott. And that's just because this class has such a deep room ahead of them on the depth charts. But like we said, we have 4 or 5 fifth-year senior guys up ahead of them. So there's going to be room next season. So these guys are going to be working hard in practice to climb the depth chart for next year. One more older guy before we get into the freshmen who could factor in is Anthony Campbell, defensive lineman number 93. This is our Calais Campbell comp, not just because they have the same name, but the homie is 6'7" and up to 300 pounds on the depth chart. He transferred in from Louisiana Monroe 2 years ago. Didn't really play last year. I feel like he transferred in at like 260 or 270. He was a lot smaller, maybe not that light, but when you're that tall, being 6'7", 280 isn't the same from a girth perspective as being, 6'3", 280. So he was like a hybrid defensive end, defensive interior, and I think last year was just an eating year for him. And now up to 300 pounds with that size, he also has a chance to be fighting for that fourth defensive tackle spot. And honestly, I could see us rolling 5-6 dudes deep, especially week 1 when they're just trying to get a feel for who's got the juice. So Anthony Campbell can get some snaps too.
Well, and Anthony Campbell is also 33 years old, seeing as he's been in college since 2004.
Yeah, and that's a 6-year redshirt senior. So he's been in college as long as anybody else on the team, other than the homie Cam McCormick, who's going on to his 9th year.
9th year. Yeah. The man did almost a decade in college.
How many degrees do you think he has?
How many degrees did he earn, or how many degrees does he have?
Yes.
I think he's earned 0 degrees. He probably has like, I want to know if he's Dr. Cam McCormick yet.
He should be. I hope he's not just on his like 3rd management certificate. Like he got the bachelor's and now he's just rolling for these like 1 class a semester.
Can you imagine this man with a PhD out here, like doctor on the back, just because he's been in school long enough to literally have a doctorate?
Can you get a PhD in general studies?
His thesis is, I did school.
Yeah. Did you ever do athletic tutoring when you were in school?
No, I spent too much time with the athletes as it was.
Yeah, so I did that my senior year for a couple classes. I did it for like
Rocks for Jocks.
No, I put myself out there for geology, but there was no athletes who actually took any of the classes I took in geology, because I didn't take like the Rocks for Jocks class. I had the actual major classes, but I did it for economics. I did it for, I'm trying to think of what else. I think most of my tutor sessions were economics though, but most of my students were like random sport girls, like swimming and tennis. So yeah, that was sick. But yeah, I mean, the tutoring programs as an athlete is just phenomenal, right? Like it's built for success.
Did I tell you about the time I worked with the women's soccer team? And I tried to convince mom that they were all kind of lame and not cool or not hot. And then 3 really hot girls saw us at a baseball game and they were like, "Oh, hi, Sam." And she's like, "Oh, they're lame and not hot." And like 3 soccer girls at Miami.
So much for that. Yeah.
I was like, no, nothing to worry about.
Classic. What were we talking about?
The fact that Anthony Campbell might actually be Calais Campbell's father because he's been in college so long.
That's his uncle. That's Calais' uncle.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so yeah, we're rolling deep on the D line. That's pretty much what we got there. Let me tell you about the freshmen, because we brought in like 7 freshmen. I don't even know how we brought in so many freshmen in this class, but it's amazing. So Marquise Lightfoot, 5-star on the defensive line. That's an edge rusher. This is going to be an eating year for him. He's probably not going to play this year, other than the cupcake games. Armando Blunt.
Yeah.
You remember hearing about him during this past cycle?
Yeah.
So he committed to Miami when he was a junior. And this was all like last fall. He was a junior. He was one of the top 5 or 10 players in the junior class, commits to Miami. A few weeks later, there's all these rumblings that he's going to reclassify to basically graduate a year early, but also that he's going to flip to Florida State. So he flips to Florida State and reclassifies and comes up to the 2024 class. Still considered kind of a fringe 5-star, like number 30, 32 or something in the class. So he has that 5th star, but he's not like a top 5 player anymore because he reclassified. But regardless, National Signing Day comes, back to Miami. So he's 17 now in college. he's kind of that hybrid defensive end, defensive line, interior type size, but ultimately he'll probably be an interior guy in a few years. So, he's just super young, super smart, obviously, to be graduating a year early. Another eating year for him. Booker Pickett. This is a legacy at Miami. His dad, Booker Pickett Sr., played here. Another big-time edge rusher. Crazy potential on the edge. Another eating year for him. Artavius Jones wasn't as highly rated as these other dudes, but like athletic freak profile, coming in at 6'3", 310. He was a dude from like a small town high school who was just the best athlete at the school, that type. Like he played running back. Like he's a 300-pound defensive tackle playing running back at this little tiny school, just plowing over all these little tiny kids. He's ready size-wise to come in and play. He doesn't need an eating year, but he's got to adjust to the competition. Honestly, and also he wasn't an early enrollee. So this isn't really the type of dude that I would expect to play this year, but I also could see a situation where his athleticism is just like so off the charts that they can't keep him off the field by the end of the season. I could see that happening, but more than likely he's a problem for next season. Cole McConaughey is Dose. We'll call him Dose. Dose McConaughey. So this is a dude who was like the best defensive lineman in Alabama high school football, but as a white kid, I don't know, he just was a little underrated. I'm sure it wasn't just because he was a white kid. It was just maybe the classification he played in. Maybe who knows, but came in physically ready to play. He's in the mix to like actually get some snaps right away at edge. Probably, the fifth or sixth guy coming off the edge, just because he's big enough and physically ready to defend the run and kind of do a little bit of everything. There's more. There's still more freshmen. It's insane. Dalen Russell, kind of like the forgotten man of this class. The staff obviously liked him to keep him in the class. When we were kind of looking at numbers at the end of last season and I was trying to figure out how they were going to get under 85, I thought he might be a drop just because we were so stacked.
Yeah.
But he's here, so obviously they think he's got something. So that's another dude to monitor for long term. And same with Elias Rudolph. This is another thinner edge rusher. Damn. Street racing out there?
My street's wild. San Francisco's a crazy place, man.
You got to get up those hills. But yeah, Elias Rudolph, eating year. I feel like Elias Rudolph, Booker Pickett, and Marquise Lightfoot are all just going to be like force-fed as much protein as possible over the next 9 months. And then next year they can actually start playing football.
So by my count, that's 37 stars worth of recruits up front that we brought in.
That's a lot of stars. I mean, honestly, we could stock a first team, a second team, a third team defensive line, and we would have 5-star recruits that don't make the cut.
Yeah.
That's insane.
It's good to be deep. And like we were talking about yesterday, Mario's building from the middle out.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we've needed for a long time.
Yeah, just like we were saying at offensive line, absolutely loaded. The second team is arguably able to be competitive against anybody that we're going to play. We could build a second team defensive line of dudes like Tyler Barron, Josh Horton, Marquise Lightfoot, Armando Blunt. That might not even be our top second team, but that's absurd talent. And you could say that about the third team too. So exciting because the defensive line is top heavy and it's deep. And if those guys can get after it, it's going to elevate every other position group on the defense.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And cover up weaknesses that we may have.
That's right. That's right. So hopefully by the end of the year, we're realizing that the secondary turns out to be a lot better than we thought. Maybe a deficiency will pop up somewhere else, but it's hard to believe. I mean, Florida State felt pretty good going into their first game, and their defensive line was not good. So, you never know until we get out there. But I feel like we're gonna get after the quarterback. I want to see 2 or 3 sacks in this first game against Florida. I don't really care about any other defensive stats. I guess the most important thing is tackles for loss.
Yeah.
We want a few tackles for loss. We want a few sacks, and the rest will fall into place.
Yep. We need to be sending Graham Mertz back to Wisconsin, having him pray to go back up TVD.
Yeah. All right. So, we saved special teams and maybe we'll think of something else to talk about tomorrow or Friday night. But I think maybe we do one more to wrap up this action-packed week of projections.
Yeah. One last close on the book for this preseason. Get ready for the beginning of Miami football.
And drink as much Kool-Aid as you can over the next 48 hours.
That's right, because the Kool-Aid's not going to go down as easy after Saturday.
Who knows? It's either going to taste great or it's going to be a little too sour.
We'll find out.
All right. On that note, Jazz, it's been great talking defense with you. I hope the one person out there listening to us has gotten something useful out of this, or at least laughed at some of our jokes.
Probably not.
Neither.
Not. All our jokes are inside jokes, so it doesn't even matter. But we did it for the boys.
That's right. We did it for us. We're here. We love us. What you got, Jazz?
Sign it off.